Hello everyone, welcome to Chaudhary Data World channel. Today I am here with a new video on SQL series, that is the commands from TCL, that is being begin transaction and set transaction. We'll be watching all the details related to begin transaction and set transaction into this particular video. So let's get started with the video. So before moving ahead with this particular video, we'll see from where this begin transaction and set transaction came into picture. So we will first move to the very first slide, in which we have categorized whole SQL into five categories, that are DDL, DML, DQL, DCL and TCL. The fifth one was TCL, which is transaction control language, into which we are having set transaction. So we'll be watching set transaction along with the begin transaction. That what begin transaction is, even because both of the terms are, or both of the statements are very confusing in each other. So I will be dealing up with both of them into this particular one. So this particular video is going to be more likely on theoretical part, because to have practical and demonstration of all these begin transaction and set transaction, we need a well infrastructure. That means we should be having multiple users to interact with the SQL server. So those all things right now we are not having. So just to get knowledge that what begin transaction and set transaction is and how we can use it in practical scenario, we will be watching into this one. So first one we are having is begin transaction. So begin transaction is nothing but it's just the mark of a starting point of a transaction that allows you to group multiple SQL statements into unit of work. So what basically it is, I will move to the example. Here you can see begin transaction example, in which we are updating the customer table and deleting some of the things from the order table. So both of the things are going into a chunk. So we are wrapping it up with the begin transaction. That means we are telling our SQL server that this particular begin transaction, when it is marked over there, that means it is a one particular chunk which is going to be, or a logical set of, it is a set of queries which is going to be executed into this particular transaction. We can even name this particular transaction as begin transaction T1 or begin transaction T2, any name you can provide for this particular transaction. So this is how we can declare our begin transaction thing. Now what it is doing is ensuring that either all statements within the transaction are executed successfully or none of them are. That means I will explain you this particular one for this begin transaction, since it is only the important functionality of begin transaction, why even this is getting used. So the answer is this particular one, that when you are doing marking that begin transaction, that means you are telling the SQL server that whatever queries written in begin transaction inside that particular begin transaction or inside that particular chunk, either all should be executed when it is followed with commit, or else we will instead of commit we will write the rollback. That means if suppose any of them is getting failed, then the things whatever will be changed till that query into that chunk, it will be rolled back. That means it will be reverted back to the previous stage. So this is why we are using this begin transaction. Hope you are very much clear. If you are not clear, you just go to my previous video into which I have covered up this one, commit, save pointer and rollback, that how this commit, save pointer and rollback works. So in this, it's just to make sure, this begin transaction is to make sure that whatever lines of code or whatever lines of queries it is getting executed, either it should execute properly, or it should execute whole, or it should be rolled back to the original stage. For that reason, begin transaction is getting used. Moving ahead with this set transaction, both are having different functionality in different perspective, because many people are getting confused that begin transaction and set transaction is approximately same thing, but it's not. Here we are just declaring the thing that it is going to be having a particular chunk where you are putting a begin transaction, and at last either you are putting a commit or the rollback. So that particular one you already got that why it is getting used. Now this set transaction is used to set the transactional isolation level for the current session. Since if you are having a multi-user environment, that means if suppose some particular database you are having into your SQL server, now this database is getting accessed by multiple users. So definitely if multiple users are accessing that database, there might be some of the table which at a particular moment of time multiple users would be using it. So what will happen is, if suppose one user will start interacting with the data of the table 1, another user also start interacting with the data of table 2, it might end up with having some conflict over there. That means if you suppose this particular guy is also modifying that same data and second one is also modifying the same data, definitely it will end up with having conflict. So this particular scenario should not happen. To deal up with this or to come up with the solution of this, we are having this set transaction. Now this set transaction will just provide the isolation level, that till what extent that particular transaction when it is going on for by the particular user A, it should be how you may say isolated, how it should be having the read operation or write operation by the second user. So that only thing is getting controlled by having set transaction. So we are having various type of set transaction. Basically those are read uncommitted, read committed, repeatable reads, serializable. So these 4 types of set transaction we are having, into which we are setting up different isolation level, that we are setting up different, you may say, protocols or rules for that particular transaction, that how it is going to be executed. Suppose user 1 is executing with some particular rule, then that rule will be applicable to all other users, that if it is having read committed. Just for example, if it is read committed, then it's a default isolation level in SQL Server which allows transaction to read only committed data. So it in that when you are that user 1 is defining that this particular transaction will go with read committed, that means it is telling up that the rule will be applied that which will allow a transaction to read only committed data. That means other users will be only be able to read the committed data. In the read uncommitted, the other users can read uncommitted data as well. So we will go one by one what all rules are and what all extent to which the rule can be applied into your particular transaction. So first one is the read uncommitted. It is very less powerful, in which what we do is when we put read uncommitted and how it is getting put even. So it is getting put even by like this, that set transaction, isolation level, and then the level you whatever you want to put over there. Either it can be repeatable read, or it can be read committed, it can be read uncommitted. Whatever you want to put over there, you can then put over there. So for this particular chunk of code, it is isolation level with repeatable read. For this particular chunk of code, the isolation level is read committed. So what the read uncommitted is, it allows a transaction to read data modified by other uncommitted transaction. When we are talking about other uncommitted transaction, means that when if suppose other users are using that particular data, which will be allowed to read the data modified by other uncommitted transaction. It doesn't enforce to lock the data. That means there is no locking concept of data. So this locking I have already explained in my previous video. You can check out that video. I have explained there very clearly that what locking is, that how this locking even getting performed into the SQL. So that read committed is about that. Read committed is again the default isolation level in the SQL Server. If you will not put any type of isolation explicitly, then what it will do, it will be taking up read committed, which is the which is allowing a transaction to read only committed data. That means whatever uncommitted data it is over there, read whatever committed data it is over there into the table, only those data will be getting read when we are having nothing explicitly isolation level, when we are not specifying any isolation level, then this read committed is over there. And then repeatable read is the other transaction can insert new rows, means whatever other users are there, they can insert new rows, but they cannot modify or delete rows that would affect the result of current transaction. So suppose some particular user 1 is doing some transaction into which there are multiple operations going up ahead with some particular table. So whatever data it is using that transaction for the user 1, those data will be kept reserved. Other data, whatever it is not getting used to in this particular transaction, those data can be used by the other users, that means with other transactions. Now this serializable is the most powerful transaction level, or you may say isolation level. That is, it enforces strict lock on the data. Other transaction cannot modify or insert data that would affect the result of the current transaction. Neither it can be modified or it can be inserted. Whatever it is, it will be fully locked. Whatever the data it is over there, when we are moving ahead with the serializable transaction, it is generally not getting used in normal day-to-day activity. It is for the admin purposes, that when the some of the admin works it is going on to the table, then this particular transaction isolation level is getting used. Others are, we are frequently using it, but this read committed is the default one, with which each of the transaction in the SQL server by default it is going on. Now we are having one example for begin transaction. I have already covered up, and in set transaction we are just having this syntax something like this, that set transaction isolation level. This will be common in each, and after that among that 4 you can provide any of them, and you can hit and try and see that how it is behaving into your SQL server. So that was pretty much all about this video, and hope you found this video knowledgeful, and this was insightful as well. So if you found this video helpful, kindly like to the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much once again. See you in the next one.